Now, I'm not here to pick on big brands, but if you go to the product page for the new Copa Sense.1 on Adi's own website, scroll down the page a little bit, you'll find 3 technologies that are highlighted with corresponding pictures. However, where it says K leather, the picture shown is not actually of any portion of the boot that has any leather whatsoever. Now, for those of you that saw my review of the laceless Copa Sense Plus, it really is one of those love it or hate it products, because while they've done certain things really well, I think they've made some questionable decisions and have kind of strayed away from what people might expect from a modern Copa football boot. However, this is the more expensive laceless model. What about the 0.1 with laces? Well, that's what I have inside this box, and I'm happy to report that it is equally as confusing. And here it is, the Adidas Copa Sense.1, the laced top-end variant in the new Copa series for 2021, bearing a retail price of $225, which is obviously less expensive than the Sense Plus, but a $15 price increase when compared to the Copa 20.1 that it replaces. What makes it confusing is if I just broke down the individual elements that make up the Copa Sense.1, you'd probably say to yourself, wow, these are terrible. But as a final product with all of these kind of unusual elements coming together, I actually think they're pretty good football boots. But again, like the Sense Plus, probably not what you would expect from something bearing the Copa name. I want to talk about why that is in today's video. We're going to go over all the tech specs as well as how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, stick around, watch the entire review. And if you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, you can click the first link down below or the little pop-up in the corner of the screen. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these up below their normal retail price. As always, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, please don't forget to support it with a like. It helps out a lot. And I've also noticed that a lot of you guys who watch these videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. If that's you, it would mean a lot to me if you could hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. Now, as for the boots themselves, and there's really no way for me to sugarcoat this, the Copa Sense.1 features less leather than quite possibly any football boot ever to be classified in the leather football boot category. And that's really not an exaggeration. There is even less leather here than what you'll find on the Copa Sense Plus, which already doesn't have a lot of leather. And it's a little bit difficult for me to show you guys because it follows a very unusual line, but you can faintly see the stitching line right here. Follow this line, go across the top of the foot, and then cutting straight down here, basically right in front of this memory foam pad. From there forward, that's the part of the upper that's kangaroo leather. So only partial forefoot even, which is pretty unheard of. And the quality of the leather, it is kangaroo leather I should add, is good. It's very thin, it's soft as you would expect, but it's so thinned out and there's so little of it on the upper, it's to the point where this doesn't really give you that leather football boot experience, which again is kind of confusing for something that is labeled as a Copa. And I think it's also worth noting that the Copa 20.1 that this replaces is a football boot that I already wasn't a big fan of, partially due to the fact that I don't think it had enough leather. This has less leather than those did, and I would argue the quality isn't quite as nice either. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but again, if your expectation is that this is going to provide a premium leather feel, I don't think you're getting it. With that said, and this is where the review kind of takes a complete 180, the Fusionskin upper found on the Copa Sense.1 I think is actually really good, and it is different from what you'll find on the Sense Plus, and that Fusionskin is still the combination of basically a synthetic and a leather. You get the kangaroo leather at the front, and then it very seamlessly transitions into more of a textile-based synthetic with this wavy design that does match kind of the design language that's really shown off on the laceless variant. As far as this material is concerned, it's significantly softer and more pliable, even has that little bit of padding to it, which we did not get whatsoever on the super stiff midfoot with that really unnecessary burrito style tongue of the Copa 20.1. This is a much more pleasant material on your foot. I think it feels really nice in terms of touch on the ball. It's consistent in terms of texture on the surface, where it really does feel like a leather boot in terms of providing really no extra grip whatsoever. And instead of an unnecessary burrito style tongue, we get something very refreshing in a simple central lacing system with a standalone tongue, which makes the world of difference in terms of the quality of fit as well as the overall comfort. Despite not really featuring that much leather, this is a boot that fits well and I think is extremely comfortable, except for the Sense Pods, which we'll get into in just a second. Something that does carry over from the Sense Plus are the Touch Pods, which are basically these memory foam inserts that are on the synthetic portion of the upper, one here on the medial side, and then a much smaller one here on the lateral side of the forefoot. And it's what you'd expect a memory foam element to feel like. It provides that little bit of extra cushion, kind of a dampened sensation, but not so much that it's taking away from the feel. And also on the topic of memory foam, the tongue, which if you remove the laces you can see, has these little memory foam inserts, basically to prevent lace bite and just increase comfort overall, that really do a nice job of providing some good cushion to the tongue while still allowing it to be nice and thin and not adding a ton of extra bulk across the top of the foot. Because again, this does use a regular central lacing system. It's a little bit wavy in terms of how the lace holes are positioned going on the way up. So it does feel a little bit more modern rather than just kind of straight up and down lacing like we see from some of the more traditional stuff like a classic Copa Mundial. But in terms of overall lockdown, largely due to the structure provided by this Fusionskin synthetic material running through the midfoot, this boot feels very secure and extremely responsive on feet, much more so than the Sense Plus model. Moving to the rear, you're going to find that this features a much more straightforward low-cut design versus what you'll find on the Sense Plus, and that it just kind of dips down at the side and then has a little bit of a tail at the back. For the most part, it feels very normal, as you'd expect from a traditional low-cut boot. And I like the way that they've done it in that there's not a lot of extra bulk along the sides. You can see it's just finished off with this thin layer of almost like a synthetic suede type material, which just feels really nice. Then we get to the back where you're going to find the Sense Pod system, where if I take this boot with the laces removed, you can maybe see it a little bit more clearly, but you have some blue pads towards the top of the Achilles tendon, you have some neon yellow pads towards the lower part of your heel, and then you have these little gray pads kind of on either side of your ankle as it flows into your foot. The idea behind these Sense Pods, which is effectively what the Copa Sense is named after, is to kind of eliminate the negative space in the heel area of the football boot to create not just a more comfortable fit according to Adidas, but also allow for the best possible heel lockdown, which I think it does very effectively. The pads are made out of this foam material with somewhat of a glossy finish to it, and while they are soft to the touch, they're a little bit firmer than what you'd find from the usual foam in a heel liner. And the reason why this ends up feeling different versus a normal football boot is typically you're going to find a heel liner has a predetermined shape, your heel sits in that predetermined shape, and depending on the shape of your foot versus the shape of the boot, there's going to be a little bit of extra space. But in general, because most boots are designed this way, your feet are kind of used to how that feels. So unless there's a significant issue with fit, you're unlikely to have any issues with discomfort, certainly blisters, where in the case of this Sense Pod system, it's kind of designed in such a way where these Sense Pods are pressing into the back of your heel and then eventually compressing to the exact shape of your heel, which means that there's more pressure against the back of your heel than a traditional heel liner would provide, which creates really good lockdown through the heel, but it's also, I guess, introducing the possibility of more friction. And I think that's immediately noticeable when you put these on for the first time. And as far as getting blisters is concerned, it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen because, like I've talked about before, blisters are something that I think you have control over. If you wear your boots long enough, go through the pain to the point where you have blisters, that's kind of on you. Any boot could give you blisters, but if you break them in slowly and just are aware of whether or not your heels are hurting, I think you can avoid the whole blister process. But the fact that they've chosen to do something like this, it's effective in terms of heel lockdown, but it's maybe a little bit questionable in terms of comfort. But your mileage may vary. Some people like that super secure feel, some people don't. I can't say that I'm a huge fan of it, but I understand why they did it. The insole is fully removable and pretty much identical to what you're going to find on the Sense Plus, minus some green highlights. You do see that it features this soft liner on the surface and then a little bump out for the area underneath your toes and then a little bump out at the heel. Not something you notice whatsoever, and then it's made from a single layer of black foam, typical of just about every top-end Adidas boot. Moving to the base of the boot, you're going to find the brand new SenseFrame Soleplate and stud pattern, which does now include an external heel counter that dips up nice and high on the sides, but then super low at the back. Love the look of it. It also feels nice and solid as well. But the sole plate itself, While it's been redesigned from the previous generation Copa, a sole plate that I was not a huge fan of, I wouldn't say that it's a gigantic improvement. For the most part, it still has the same characteristics in terms of being just more on the flexible side. This seems to have a little bit more thickness to it, so if you prefer a more solid feel, I suppose they've given you that. It's got good rigidity through the midfoot, and in general, just feels really good. There's nothing about it that I would say stands out from a feature standpoint. And if I had to compare it to another sole plate on the market right now, it actually reminds me of the one found on the New Balance Tequila, which is a sole plate that I quite like. So in general, I would say that this is a decent improvement, but certainly nothing groundbreaking. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, this of course is their FG layout. Same stud pattern layout that we're used to seeing within the Adi brand, but you can see they've added some more aggressive elements with kind of blades at the tip of the toe, blades at the base of the heel. The studs are a little bit longer than the previous FG stud pattern found on the Copas as well. You can see you have kind of this conical stud with a little outline around half of it. So it's kind of like this conical bladed hybrid, but in general, you're not going to find that this is overly aggressive in comparison to just about all the other lines within the Adi brand. It gets the job done. There's not too much special to say about it. But then you also have the soft studs features, which of course are highlighted here in white on these two studs on the medial side, and they are made from a softer plastic material that, according to Adidas, will flex upon impact to allow for better control. If you think slightly softer plastic studs that you cannot feel whatsoever are going to improve your control, be my guest, but in general, this is one of those super gimmicky elements that I don't think does anything at all. Which brings us to the weight, where given the fact that there is less leather and the boot seemingly has a more simple construction than the Sense Plus, maybe they're a little bit lighter, but that's not the case at all. In a size 9.5 US, you can see that the Copa Sense.1 weighs in at 9.5 ounces, the equivalent of 269 grams, which is roughly half an ounce more than what you're gonna find from the Sense Plus, basically making this the heaviest of the top end options available from the big three brands. Is that to say that these feel heavy on your feet? Definitely not. But do they feel light? Definitely not. So here are the Copa Sense.1s on feet paired up with some black Pure Grip socks, which for those that don't know is my own brand of grip socks that have grips on the bottom to help with eliminating some slippage on the inside of your boots, in turn increasing the overall comfort. However, they're much more affordable than many of the other grip socks out there, bearing a retail price of just $14.99. They're available in a wide variety of colors at puregripsocks.com. If you're interested in checking some out, that'll be linked down below. Now, as far as how these boots fit and feel on feet, they do feel significantly different from the laceless Sense Plus for obvious reasons. While both feature Kangaroo leather, pretty much everything else about the two uppers is quite different other than the Sense Pods in the heel. But because of the lacing system and the extra lockdown provided by said lacing system, the Sense Pods feel much more manageable in terms of, I guess, how much friction there is against your heel, because your foot in general is more secure in the boot. It's not putting as much pressure on your heel, because with the laceless system, it's always going to stretch a little bit. This, with the laces tied tight along with the regular tongue, it's just kind of refreshing to have a football boot that goes on your foot so easily and ties up so nicely. They just feel really good on feet, and the modified shape, especially in comparison to the Copa 20.1, this is arguably the best fitting football boot from the Adi brand. I absolutely love the overall shape. The Sense Pod system though, again, something to keep in mind, you need to break these in slowly because there is extra pressure on your heel that most other boots would not have. So you just have to be aware of that in order to avoid blisters. As far as width is concerned, width-wise, I think they have some decent width to them. Obviously, the material through the midfoot's not going to stretch that much, and despite this being a Kangaroo leather football boot, there's not a lot of that. So you're not going to get a ton of stretch out of this upper. They're obviously very soft through the toes, so there's definitely some stretch there. But in general, they have nice structure all the way through, and the base shape, I would say, is going to be wide enough for most people. If you have super wide feet, I'm not sure that these would be the greatest option for you, but in general, most people are going to fit in them quite comfortably. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order some for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, despite the lack of and decrease in quality of the leather, the arguably unnecessary Sense Pod heel liner, the increase in price, the gimmicky elements that are featured here, and the fact that this is probably not the Copa .1 model that most people were expecting or hoping for, the Copa Sense.1 is still a pretty solid pair of football boots. And the reason why I say that is because this is a football boot that offers a combination of features that you really can't get from anything else right now. And I think that a lot of the choices Adidas made were poor, but the end result is a product that still feels really solid, fits extremely well, and if you can deal with the SensePod system, depending on the specific shape of your heel, to which you won't really know if they're gonna work with you until you try them on, I think this is a football boot that really does perform extremely well. Does it compete directly against something like a Nike Tiempo or even the Puma King Platinum? Probably not, just due to the lack of leather, but for those that have been screaming for more of a true synthetic football boot, while there's still some Kangaroo leather featured here on the toe, maybe it's a little bit of a harsh or stretch comparison, but this does kind of remind me of something along the lines of a Nike CTR 360 boot, in that you do get this majority synthetic upper that does, for the most part, offer a thinner leather-like sensation while not actually being leather. Even though I would have loved to have seen more leather, the synthetic they've used genuinely feels really good. It's soft, it's pliable, and has decent structure. The central lacing system with a regular tongue is something that we just don't see that often anymore and does work well. The fit and general shape of the boot, I think, is hugely improved over the Copa 20.1 that it replaces. The SensePod, it's a point of question. Some people are gonna love it, some people are gonna hate it. And while they're not the lightest thing in the world, I think that this Soleplate really gives this boot a nice solid feel that you can't get from any of the alternatives out there. So this is far from a football boot that I think a lot of people will like, but if what I've described sounds good to you, I think there's a lot to like about the Copa Sense.1, even though it's probably the football boot that nobody wanted, or at least very few people. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in a pair for yourself with SR4U coupon codes to get them below their normal retail price, first link down below, go ahead and check that out. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask them down below in the comment section. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.